Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Mesut Ozdol. I will be the moderator of this important session. First of all, we would like to thank you for your participation in our conference. In this session, we will be hosting very important panelists, and we will be talking about the COVID-19 effect on flat steel, coated steel, and steel pipe sector. The main subject of our session is the uncertainties in the middle of trade wars and the impact of COVID-19 on investments and steel industry, particularly the effects in the steel industry. In this session, we have 4 panelists who will be sharing their opinions about the subject. After the presentation of each panelist, we will be holding a Q&A session with all of the panelists. So, to ask your questions to the panelists, you can use the Q&A box on the right-hand side of the screen, and you can ask your questions at any time during the presentation. If you would like to ask your question anonymously, please check the box Ask Anonymously to let us know. Distinguished guests, our first panelist is Kerem Cakir, the General Manager of Borcelik. Kerem Bey, the floor is yours. Hello, Murat Bey. Welcome. Welcome to our session. We would like to thank you for accepting our invitation. Without losing the pandemic, when it first started in Turkey and in our territory, there was a pressure on the steel industry. What did you experience during that time? How did you fight with the collapse in the demand? Thank you. Before starting my presentation, I would like to thank Murat Bey and everyone for the invitation. This is an important invitation with a high turnout and Steel Orbis. We have been participating in Steel Orbis as a panelist or participant, but it is promising that you are continuing this series of conferences on the online platforms. During the pandemic, how did we fight against the collapse in the demand? As you have said, there was a strong impact of the pandemic, particularly in January and February. There was a good acceleration during that time in the industries that use steel. The production rate was increased by 5 or 6%, but in March and April, everyone hit the brakes. Let me give you some numbers. In the automobile industry, this year, the production rate in April was lower by 91% as compared to last year. In household appliances, in April 2020, the production was lower by 52% as compared to April 2019. But Turkey is quite familiar with crisis. Personally, in the last 25 years, I have seen 4. This is the 4th or 5th crisis that I have seen. But it triggered many things. Maybe 10 years ago, the president of Turkey threw the constitution at the prime minister, and it triggered a crisis. After that, there was a crisis triggered by the Lehman Brothers. Sometimes there are different triggers of the economic crisis, but before there were other crises which affected the demand. I believe that our company and the steel and iron industry is able to develop the appropriate reflexes in the face of this crisis. We often focus on 2 things in this crisis, and we did the same thing this time. We continued our close communication with the customers, particularly during the 2 or 3 months. Because you have to follow the customer so that you can adjust your raw materials, your stocks, because sometimes you may have to produce something, but you may not be able to deliver it and have to keep it in your stock, and it may affect your capital. And secondly, be focused on exports. I would like to underline this. Before all of our competitors abroad, we acted very quickly to focus on exports. At Borcelik specifically, but I think this is applicable for all big industrialists. In the domestic market, you grow, and Borcelik holds 45% of the market share in automobile and 35% of the market share in household appliances. But when the domestic market shrinks, it is quite expensive to fight for more market share. Trying to go from 35% to 40%, and the expenses to do so would be too high. So ultimately, there is a specific volume in Turkish market. We consume 35 million tons of steel, but the world consumes 1.6 billion tons of steel. It is 50 times higher than Turkey. So if you act quickly, you can take many opportunities. And Borcelik has been founded for customers who demand special steel products, but increasing our market share on the global scale is less costly than increasing our market share in Turkey. But you need to have a team. You have to have international contacts who know you, who know your materials, who know your products, because otherwise penetrating these markets would take many years. Even if you have a solid ground in the domestic market, you should have investments in exports, considering you will have some crisis. And we had done this in the past. We already had international customers. It has been very easy for us to direct our stocks to exports. And during the pandemic, we expanded our exports. Our export budget in 2020 was achieved by September 2020. And in June, we saw the highest monthly export volume of Borcelik's history. So this increased our penetration, our customer portfolio. 35% of our customer portfolio consists of new customers today. So except for April, we were able to move our customers from domestic to international markets very quickly. Thank you very much. As far as I understand, you focused on two main areas to fight this crisis. One, focusing on customers. Two, exports. Yes. For exports, you said you have to have some preparation to cover the gaps that are created. And in terms of customer demand, you said 35% of our customer portfolio is the new customers. I'm talking about the export side. It's not in the domestic market. It's not the same in the domestic market. Here, being customer oriented is very important for me. I really like this phrase. Being customer oriented is even more important during times of crisis, as you have just said. And the companies try to be more customer oriented when there is a collapse in the demand. And at other times, they are not so customer oriented. Am I right? Well, at Borcelik, we are always customer oriented, and we are just picking the fruits of our efforts in exports. Yes, being customer oriented is very important at all times, but I think the level of this focus may vary at times. And second question. After the start of the pandemic, I think you said May, was it in May? It was in April, actually. We felt the strongest effect in April. Yes, the pandemic started in March in Turkey, and the month of April was quite a challenging month for us. And so, a while after the pandemic started, particularly with the effect of China, there was an opportunity of recovery in the steel industry, particularly in November, last month, there was a high level of activity. What do you think about that? Yes, you said activity. Yes, this activity is very amazing. The seniors in the sector would remember what happened in 2008. And we are a little bit worried because sometimes these fast collapses may be followed by fast recoveries, may not be followed by fast recoveries. But when we analyze this activity, there are some differences. I think there are two main factors that are important in this activity. The first one, as you have mentioned, the impact of China. It made a big influence. More than 50% of the global demand comes from China. So 33% of the demand comes from China. And China did not stop during the pandemic. They did not contract. According to the data for the first nine months, it grew by 10% as the European Union and NAFTA shrank by 9 or 10%. Now, China is the wave of the steel and iron industry. When a wave happens in China, it affects everywhere. Mr. Çolakoğlu also talked about this. For the first time, China started imports for the first time in the last 2 months. So this means there is a wave. I believe that maybe those who have a background in industrial engineering know about the whip effect. This is a classical type of whip effect. You remember the wave-like form of the whip. This means that from the end consumer to the producer, the variation in the demand, the positive and negative variation of the demand increases. This whip effect may be increased in some circumstances or in some sectors when the delivery leads are very long. For example, the whip effect may be increased. And we have seen everything that would lead to an increase in the whip effect since March. There was no demand. The delivery leads are very long in our sector. The turnaround time for a refrigerator cover is about 4 months. So because of this whip effect, the demand for HRC or flat steel has been fluctuated even more strongly than the other steel products. So the stocks of all players on the supply chain went to bottom, and we now feel the direct impact of this whip effect. I think this increase and decrease in this whip effect, in this demand, will be smaller in time. But our companies have a business model on the flat steel, which is based on very high capacity use ratios. 75–90% capacity use ratios are normal in our sector. So our customers dropped their demands by 50% in April, May. Now they are placing their orders 2 times higher, but there is a ceiling of our capacity. And There is another factor that is very important in terms of the supply and demand balance. In the last quarter, with the impact of the pandemic, there was some capacity shutdown. Approximately 150 million tons of capacity has been permanently shut down, and approximately 200 million tons of capacity has been temporarily shut down, and approximately 90% of this capacity has been recently reused. And when you think about all of this, when you add this limitation in the capacity, the real recovery in the demand has been turned into a big activity, and this is not quite surprising for us. Yes, I really like this term, the whip effect. When I think back, whip effect is very related to demand. It has an impact on the customers. For example, a customer demands 100 tons, but they come to us and they say, I need 1,000 tons of sheet. Yes, they may not come for another 2 months. It's the bad side of this. Because of the pandemic, we have seen something else. As the number of cases increased, we saw the prices soared in an unprecedented way. Do you think the pandemic could be a good indicator for the economies from now on? Because everyone's happy about the prices. Yes, the price increases because of the balance in supply and demand. In automobile, household appliances, they want to buy products, but when you look at the real economy, the European automobile industry shrank by 20%. It will shrink by 10% in Turkey. So it's because of the supply and demand that the price is fluctuating. So yes, it may be misleading. Yes, as you know, the prices can be volatile because of the impact of the raw materials. But this time it was not because of the raw materials. It was because of the supply and demand balance. Thank you very much. Let's continue with the third question. During this pandemic, face masks, social distancing, and hygiene have become very important. And on social media, on the press, on televisions, from the first day, people made very significant efforts to raise awareness. But we often thought about the social places, but people in the factory floor, during our relationship with our workers, we had to undertake very important responsibilities in terms of social responsibility and hygiene. Thank you very much for bringing this up. Yes, actually the manufacturing floors, the factory floors were ignored in these campaigns. Immediately after the start of the pandemic, we established a committee, HR, corporate relations, IT, procurement, all departments were on this committee. Our purpose was to protect our workers and to sustain our activities. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we had three main focuses: protecting our workers, our business, and our stakeholders. This is still our motto because the pandemic is not over yet. I thank you very much for stressing this because our industry, the manufacturing industry, is different somehow. We don't have the chance of remote working from home. We cannot produce from home. To produce a galvanized product, our blue-collar workers, the shift supervisor, and the other workers have to be physically there. Of course, we have some measures in our facilities, but in the middle of this uncertainty, during the lockdown, with the stay-at-home messages going on, all of our workers, all of our employers went to work. Our executives were on the job at all times. They gave the messages to the workers that they were with them. And I would like to thank all workers and employees in the manufacturing industry who have kept our economy alive at this time, because of the disruption in the tourism industry, it has been the manufacturing industry that kept our economy alive. And I would like to thank the workers in the industry. There were some highlights during the pandemic. The first one is communication. As you know, there is, if you do something excessively, it may be bad, but this is not applicable for communication, because we are living at a time of uncertainty. Everyone's saying something else, and communicating transparently and regularly has been very useful for us. And having a robust IT infrastructure is also important. During the first few months, April, June, July, May, June, when the testing was restricted, we developed a system to track the contacts and to do our own filiation activities, because when the other workers are contracted with the disease, our manufacturing capacity can be affected. And now we are working with an accredited laboratory. When there is an infected worker, our company covers the costs for the testing for the workers. And as is the case in the whole manufacturing industry, in our cafeteria, in our locker rooms, in our mustering points, we have made significant modifications, and we also listened to the needs of the workers. We did the necessary amendments in the factory floor. You are very right. I ask this question because this is a very important subject. When you watch the TV, you see that people are talking about the cafes and restaurants and social distancing in these locations. It's quite easy to obey these restrictions, but people are not following these rules. And in a factory floor or in a hospital, when you need to do when you need to support, when you need to do some maintenance on equipment, you have to be physically there. It's very difficult, and I think you have been very successful. Thank you very much. Now, question 4. As you know, the galvanized sheet production capacity has gone beyond consumption with the recent investments, and people had to export these products. There is some protection and competition in global markets, but exporters have taken the opportunities, and they have been successfully going on with these exports in automobile, household appliances, heating, construction, and machinery industry. You have been supplying products, and you can go one step ahead of your competitors. But what are your forecasts about the increase in demand in Turkey? What is the future of galvanized sheet? Mesut Bey, let me talk about the industry now. I'm also the chairman of the Association of Galvanized Sheet Producers, but to make a brief evaluation about the future of the galvanized sheet sector, there will be an excess of capacity. This will be a highlight. And secondly, access to good raw materials in terms of quality and quantity. These two topics will be the highlights of our sector. Excess of capacity. After 2015, the capacity of cold rolling was 32%, but the galvanized sheet capacity was increased by 72%. We hear that some are planning to make new investments. Some of them have announced this publicly. And in terms of investments, I think our galvanizing capacity will be 4.7 million tons and domestic consumption will be 2.9 million tons. So it is not 2 times of the demand, but I think there will be an excess of capacity that is close to 2 times of the amount of production. About the future of galvanized sheet, I'm not very hopeful. Sometimes we hear some news about investments such as Volkswagen, and we get excited, but with the COVID and with the economical developments, I believe that there will be no new investments that will trigger consumption. Of course, there are some developments for Dynafox, some partnerships, new drying facility of Candy, Bosch, Siemens, BSH, moving their facility from Greece to Cherkezköy. These are exciting news, but there is a huge, massive excess of capacity in galvanized sheet, and these investments will not be sufficient to absorb it. As has been the case in the last few years, in the next years, we will focus more on exports. Of course, there is protectionism, there are differences in freight, there is a huge supply, so exports will not be very easy. Competition with the integrated facilities will be very difficult. Of course, our roiling and sheet sector has been able to take the rabbit out of the hat at all of the times. It has been always successful. This is in our DNA. I think we will do the same in the future, and we will be able to use our excess of capacity for exports. And the second highlight, access to raw materials. At this point, I think the domestic producers, manufacturers should increase their hot rolling capacity. The cold rolling capacity has been increased to 3 million tons. This also means there is an increased demand for hot rolling, but there is no investment in hot rolling. In the last few months, cold rolling production has been above the hot rolling production. Even during the pandemic, the production in cold rolling has been above the amount of consumption. But because of the lack of sufficient production in hot rolling, we cannot use them for exports. But there are some good news. I hope we will have more options of local raw materials in hot rolled steel. And I'm curious, what kind of news are you talking about? Where actually there are a very few players, but I believe that we will be seeing new developments that will increase the hot rolling steel production capacity of Turkey. And I hope the amount of production will go beyond consumption. As you speak, I remembered our days when hot rolling sheet manufacturing line was a very value-added line, and it was something cool, actually. I think we are a bit problematic about this. In the past, there was no hot rolled manufacturing. Now you say there is an excess of production. Now, there are some protectionist approaches around the world, so it is difficult to focus on this area, and I hope it will be good in the future. Particularly, there will be some developments in the using industries, as you mentioned in your answer. Yes, automobile, household appliances, and in the radiator industry, there are some investments, but there is an excess of capacity. Now, let's move to another industry, an important industry for us. It is our number one industry in the exports for many years. As we have seen from yesterday's presentations, there are some lines going down, and it is the automobile industry that has felt the worst impact. What is the situation of supply in automobile industry? What kind of developments are you expecting, and what are your forecasts about the local automobile production project?
Well, we have to evaluate it in terms of two things. First of all, the quality and the quantity. The automotive sector is open for further development in terms of the quantity and the quality, and it was always in our front agenda because they are always seeking for much more resistant and much more easier to be shaped sheets. And most of the materials have become standard materials. Right now, we are using, dual phase type of quality actually products. Of course, thanks to the galvanization technology in the line of European Union standards, we are providing input to our industry. As you know, we are the first company in Turkey who actually produced the hoods of the cars in a mass scale. I mean, 3 years ago, we actually established an R&D center which carried out the designing simulation analysis. So we supported the R&D processes with such kind of activities, and in order to develop the coating and the corrosion resistant materials, we are cooperating with the OEM companies. This is what we do. But what happened in Turkey in terms of the development in the quality of the products, I can divide this into two. On the downstream side, I'm speaking about the facilities which are producing the cold rolled products. For example, Erdemir commissioned its new production line. It is the latest development. And 70% of the cold rolled galvanized sheet is provided by the local resources already. And with the commissioning of this new facility of Erdemir, the local production will boost as well. On the upstream side, there are producers who are focusing on the CFR and also the scrap. I mean, the upstream producers are also important because, I mean, you can find out the hot rolled, galvanized sheets, but it's not easy for you to produce it very easily. On the upstream production side, we have a handicap, a disadvantage. We are using the scraps most of the time. The presence of the trace elements in the electric arc furnaces is the biggest barrier in the automotive sector. But still, I see that there are very useful and beneficial activities going on. There are companies who are using the electric arc furnaces, but there are certain pilot activities. We have a supplier with whom we are trying to develop new quality products. Of course, reaching to the necessary quality will require time, but I am sure and certain that it will contribute a lot for the improvement in the quality of our products. Let's continue with the other topic. What about the quantity? What about the tonnage? Unfortunately, the demand didn't turn out as we expected. After 2014, there was a huge demand for the vehicles. And when I say vehicle, of course, I also mean that the light transportation vehicles and light trucks. And in 2017, we actually had the groundbreaking record with 1.1 million vehicles. But unfortunately, each year we actually reduced our quantity. And this year, most probably, the number of the cars and trucks that we produce will be just below the 2014 figures. As I told you, there has been many actually important developments. Ford Volkswagen merger, I mean cooperation, and the TOK, the Turkish local car, might be produced as well. But in the horizon, we don't see such kind of a big investment like the investment of Volkswagen. I mean, in order to reach to the figures of 2017, most probably we will have to wait until 2025. This is the demand side. And on the supply side, I can say that the capacity is enough. With the Ereğli new production facility, most probably the local resources will be utilized even more. Last but not least, let me speak about the Turkish local car, TOG, because they are our neighbors in the Gemlik vicinity. Of course, we have a huge experience in the automotive sector, and we are quite close to this area. I mean, to the factory, and we actually allocated and mobilized all of our resources. And in order to shape the material and in order to increase the resistance of the material, we have been cooperating with the TOK company, the Turkish local car producing company. And also, the previous speaker also mentioned that it's not a secret information. We are aiming to produce the car, and the target is to reach to producing 110,000 car on a yearly basis by 2017, and 3 different types of cars will be produced. So 117,000 car production on a yearly basis to be reached by 2027 is not a huge number. It will not change the game, but it is strategically important for Turkey. It's a very important national project, and we will do our best to give our best support. So let me ask you another question. What do you think is the reason behind the reduction in the car production, car manufacturing? Okay, the pandemic has an impact, but it started before pandemic. Well, in 2019, there was a huge level of uncertainty. People were discussing whether the electric vehicles will be replacing the conventional cars or not. So as a result of that, the end users postponed their decision of buying and acquiring a vehicle so that they will actually buy their vehicles with the right strategy. In our executive board, there was a gentleman, an elder gentleman, and let me quote his experience in Germany. He stated that I went to a BMW selling shop, and he stated that I was the youngest person in that shop, in that car gallery. So, I mean, the sharing economy and the future of the sharing economy will definitely shape the demand for the automobiles. And I can say that the presence of the sharing economy actually stopped this demand to go further. Of course, all of those, urbanization going on should boost the demand, but those reasons, those actually factors were the reasons for reducing the demand for the automobiles. I was also suspicious about that. Most probably the uncertainty is actually reducing the demand. I mean, in the past, for example, the fuel was quite cheap, but right now there is no, meaning. I mean, the manufacturing of the electricity vehicles will be increasing, and that's why I think that I should postpone my decision for buying a car for myself. So, last but not least, could you please speak about your forecast and expectations for 2021? Well, Mr. Mesut, I was expecting this question, but I most probably this is the topic on which I can make the least comments. Well, right now we are living with shorter time frames. Let me put it this way. I mean, I'm not speaking on behalf of the uncertainty in Turkey only. There is such a huge level of uncertainty on the global scale. That's why it is almost impossible to make reasonable forecasts for 2021. Well, what I can say is that, I mean, with comparison to 20 years before, the steel industry has already learned how to balance the supply and demand, and I do believe this is a healthy development. And for Turkey, with the commissioning of the new facilities and factories, I do believe that this balance will be even more stronger and solid. Of course, the demand is fluctuating a lot, and it has huge repercussions on our sector. But I do believe that we will not see such kind of fluctuations as we have seen on the month of April. It will not be, full throttle and all of a sudden putting our foot on the full brake. Most probably in 2021, we will also see lots of fluctuations, but there are promising developments with regards to the vaccines, and hopefully all of those factors will improve our sector. Thank you so much for your valuable analysis and valuable information, Mr. Kerem. Thank you so much. Well, valuable participants, we have stated that in this session we will continue with a very important sector for steel producers for our sector, the pipe sector. Why it is really important? We are producing the welded pipe, with the highest quantity in the Europe, and Turkey is also actively participating in the the energy projects, and the steel pipe producers are also contributing to all of those projects. So right now we will continue with Kemal Sarac from Steel Pipe Producers, the Steel Pipe Manufacturers Association. Thank you so much, valuable participants. First and foremost, I would like to thank Mr. Murat Eryilmaz for providing us this opportunity to share our ideas with you. As the moderator has stated, with our experience in this field and with our high quality mentality, the Turkish steel pipe manufacturers have become well known in the global scale, and we have proven ourselves by exporting to many countries. China is producing 70 million tons of welded pipe, 8 million by Russia, and 5 million tons of welded pipe is produced by the South Korea. And Turkey last year produced 4.1 million tons of welded pipe. So Turkey ranks at the 4th place on the global scale. Of course, from time to time, our production output reached to 4.5 million, of course. Our local suppliers and also the international suppliers are among our important customers. And I can say that there is at least double time of overcapacity. Of course, the unplanned investments which have been carried out in the past created this overcapacity, but we are trying to balance it with the exports. And we are exporting to to many countries, including but not limited to advanced and developed economies. You are totally right. But let me ask you this question. Although there has been many protectionist precautions, you continued with your exports without almost any loss. How could you succeed that? Well, as you know, European Union and United States of America were the most important customers and clients. And as a result of those protectionist measures, of course, we had huge difficulties and problems, and those problems didn't fade away. Of course, the pandemic also aggravated the situation, and of course, the steel pipe sector has had huge problems and bottlenecks due to those factors. But as the pandemic eased a little, our export continue to increase, and we are continuing to export to the European Union countries. Of course, European Union is implementing certain quotas for our exports, which has been issued 1.5 years before. And as a result of those quotas, I would like to state that our export declined by 20% towards European Union. Yes, exactly. So most probably in the upcoming future, this will be the case because we see that the global economy and the European Union economy couldn't reach to its expected maturization. So most probably this will be the case in the future. Of course, European Union is our biggest market, right? Exactly. Yes, as you have stated, but the figure that you have articulated is an important figure, and you have stated that due to the quota issued by the European Union, our export declined by 20% to the European Union. Well, let me interrupt a little bit, but despite all these, in the first 9 months of 2020, we have exported 933 million dollars, and we have exported 1.3 million tons of actually steel pipe, and we expect this number to go to the level of 1.8 million tons and with the value of 1.2 billion US dollars. As a result, once again, I would like to reiterate that the steel pipe sector in Turkey reached to that point with our being well known. And as far as I can say, your actual production level is just beyond 4.1 million tons. So you can state that, I mean, 50% of your production goes to the exports then, which is a huge level of success. All right, then, let's speak about the USA. What do you think? What kind of an effect we will see after the US elections? Do you think it will have positive repercussions? Well, Mr. Mesut, we still have question marks in our hands whether the election results are the final in the USA. No, it's final already, so the Trump's era comes to an end. Well, it's not easy to make forecasts, but even before Trump and during the term of Obama, there were protectionist measures. Of course, it increased with the Trump administration. And as far as I can say, the policy of Biden administration towards China will be almost the same. In the United States of America, they have 232 section, which they implement towards the European Union, by the way. But we believe that most probably the agreement will be settled between European Union and USA. Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico, Canada, and Australia are exempt from that Section 232. And Turkey, by the way, won the trial against the USA about additional 25% of additional tax, but the USA went for appeal. So this process is hanging. Of course, anti-dumping precautions and CCD precautions are also implemented by the USA. OCP pipes, welded pipes are among the product portfolios which are covered under this protectionist measures, by the way. Well, in the USA, the anti-dumping precautions are changing between 0 to 120. Of course, those are important figures. It will definitely prevent the exports going out of Turkey to the USA. And I also would like to state that without the revival in the global economies, most probably the protectionist measures will continue. They will try to protect their own industry. Of course, it will have a negative impact on our competitiveness of our sector, and this can also lead to the contraction in the EU quotas. Of course, once again, I would like to state that it will have a negative impact on our export markets, but the competition in the local market will most probably boost up. Well, what you say is not promising. We have also listened from Mr. Schiamarelli, so he didn't also provide promising data to us. Hopefully, the conditions will improve in favor of our country as well. Well, you are competing in the international markets. Let's not say to increase the export capacity, but at least to preserve it. What should we do and what can we do? Well, as you have rightfully mentioned, there is a high level of competition. Unfortunately, sometimes quality and certain other features of our products might be beaten by the cost. So we should be also competitive on the cost side. And unfortunately, sometimes we are competing with our own producers as well. The Turkish steel pipe sector has disadvantages in terms of reaching to the raw material. The cost is one of them. There are problems in terms of the quality and also the maturity date of the agreements. So the steel pipe sector should overcome those problems. The flat steel production cannot meet the flat steel consumption in Turkey. The producers cannot also deliver their production on time. And at the same time, we are not able to receive the materials, flat steel raw materials, on the global prices, which creates a disadvantage in terms of the competition in the global markets. Mr. Kerem also mentioned, hopefully with the commissioning of new facilities and new investments, hopefully the supply and demand issue will be balanced. And we also expect from our ministries and the relevant bodies of the ministries to take an active part, because there are many countries who are imposing sanctions to our products, not only United States of America or Europe, from Algeria, from Saudi Arabia. The sanctions are also imposed on us, so we have had challenges. So I do believe that if we come together with the relevant stakeholders in front of the same table, I do believe we can progress. That's why our ministries have huge responsibility, because the protectionist measures are not something we can on our own deal with. So what you have mentioned is really important. Well, those are the issues that we have been discussing. the deadline and also the maturity date of the agreements. I mean, this was a problem in the past 30 years ago. And if you remember back then, important investments have been done for the flat steel production. Most probably Mr. Gokhan will remember our capacity increased to the level of 20 million tons, give it or take. So still the maturity date, I mean, the deadline of the deliveries are still continuing. So most probably it doesn't have anything to do with the capacity. It has something to do with the quality. I can understand that. But this deadline issue is, an issue for all kind of products. By the way, I also would like to add that in Turkey, 10 million tons of flat steel production are being carried out by Erdemir and İsdemir. I mean, when we take into consideration that the export of flat steel products are going on, that's why the products left for Turkey is reducing. In Turkey, we are consuming 16 million or 17 million tons of flat steel products. As a result, on a minimum basis, we are in need of 3 million tons of imports for the flat steel products. And on the other hand, the producers can deliver their products, within 2 or 3 months, minimum, and it has negative impact on our deadlines as well. Of course, during the pandemic, it is even worse. But generally speaking, due to their suppliers, the steel pipe manufacturers have deadline issues from a very long time. I mean, I have been active in the sector for the last 20 years, and we have been actually experiencing those problems. And you should definitely remember, I mean, we have such problems in the past as well. So most probably nothing changed really. Well, Mr. Kemal, I interrupt again, but in our time, we had problems in terms of certain quality products in terms of the deadline. Since we are exporting abroad, the qualities were, different. And also the automotive qualities were different. But we didn't have deadline problems with the commercial quality products. But of course, for certain products, we have those deadline actually issues. In the past, we were receiving the orders for 3 months, and then we reduced the delivery time to the 1 month. And I do believe right now the deadlines are 1 month also. I'm not sure. I'm not following up. Right now, I mean, the deadlines are 3 months. I mean, the steel pipe manufacturers and the other players in the sectors deliver their products in 3 months. I mean, sometimes it is going even beyond 3 months. For example, right now, when they receive an order, they commit that they will deliver their products on March. So the deadline is already 3.5 months right now. So it's not something very good. I hope this issue will be improved. Most probably this is what the conditions require. Let's continue with the other question. So what do you think that the manufacturer companies, what kind of a targets they will define for themselves?
Of course, from construction to drilling, from construction to machinery, steel pipes are used everywhere. And because of the environmental impact, people demand it. There is an environmentalist trend in the world, and plastic pipes are less environmental than steel pipes, so steel pipes are more in demand. As I mentioned in the beginning of my speech, although our steel pipe capacity is high. For many years, there are companies that are manufacturing with experienced workers. And as the sector grows around the world, the demand for steel pipes in all areas will grow in all areas. And in terms of capacity, I think our manufacturing industry will be able to maintain its competitiveness. There is some transformation in this area. We have spiral pipes, the pipes with a big diameter. They are popular in big construction projects. So with more projects, there will be some demand for these pipes. And we also want to see that more resources are allocated to this oil drilling, because there is a drilling potential in Turkey, and these pipes were exported for international projects, but due to the less contracts in the Middle East, we are seeing some negative effect in the exports of these big diameter steel pipes. We need the government support in this area. And in the Kirkuk-Mosul pipeline, there was a renovation project, but it has been postponed. We believe it will be taken off the shelf. And because of the expected earthquake in Turkey, I think steel will be more intensively used in construction projects in Turkey. And in Turkey, we have a main industry and buy industry and parts production industry for automobile. And we see that we will be supplying more and more to these industries across the years. So these are our main objectives. So thank you. Finally, what are your expectations for 2021? For 2021, it's difficult to make long-term plans in Turkey, as you know. There are various factors that affect the economic and social life. Sometimes it's impossible to make forecasts. When you look at the data, we cannot be very optimistic, and we have some foreign issues in Turkey. Sometimes we are faced with unexpected circumstances, and the impact of the pandemic will be here to stay for a long time. And we are living in a seismic zone. There was an earthquake in Izmir. There are other expected earthquakes, and that they affect the working life negatively. In steel industry, since this summer, there is some dynamism, and according to the national and international orders, I think this activity will continue during Q1. Turkey produces 2.5% of the total steel production in the world, but in general, it is dependent on foreign markets. The developments in industrialized countries and the countries that supply raw materials will have a huge impact on the Turkish steel industry. The growth rates in developed countries will be improved in the future. I think this will bring some stability to prices, and this effect will also be felt in Turkey. Of course, steel pipe industry will be affected by these developments in Turkey and the world. Particularly the pandemic, the course of the pandemic will be important. The course of the protectionist measures in exports will also be influential for our manufacturers. The volatility in markets and currency rates will also influence our business because it affects the prices in exports markets. I think we are done now. Thank you very much for your comprehensive evaluation. Have a nice day. Now, we will be talking with Another organization, Turkish Association of Flat Steel Exporters and Manufacturers, Chairman Gokhan Demiruz, an important organization that works to improve the flat steel industry in Turkey. Welcome. Hello. Welcome, Gokhan Bey. Thank you. We are talking about the impact of COVID-19 on the flat steel industry in Turkey. First of all, I would like to wish happy and healthy days for all stakeholders in the industry. I hope Turkey and the whole humanity will recover from this pandemic very soon on behalf of our members. I would like to extend our greetings to everyone. Our organization has been established in 1985 and we have 90 members. This is the 5th Steel Orbis conference. I have participated in 10 of these conferences, and this year we are coming together on virtual platforms, but hopefully next year we will be physically together. What kind of a year did we have? As you know, Turkey produces 13.5 million tons of flat steel. This means 1,150,000 tons per month. So in January and February 2020, we achieved these production volumes, but during the subsequent months, during the March and April, where the pandemic was very strong, our monthly production went down to 800,000 tons. This production volume fell down because the demand went down. We did negotiations with our members and our customers, and we saw that during the 2 months or 3 months where the pandemic was strongly felt, the demand was going down by 200%. Following that, there was some recovery in the economy and the demand was recovered to previous years. And this year, towards the end of the year, we saw there was some recovery in the demand. In the production of flat steel, we are seeing the same numbers as last year, 13 million tons in production. And consumption will be about the same numbers last year, about 14-15 million tons. The second factor of this pandemic was the increase in currency rates. We started, currently it's about 7.85. So this means the Turkish value lose its value, Turkish lira lose this value by 40% during this year. During our budgeting activities, our members, the banking industry, the finance industry, no one would estimate that our currency would lose its value so much. We don't know if it is particularly because of the pandemic, because according to the central bank's inflation report, there was some money injection in the market, but it was allocated to foreign exchange. We don't know if this happened because of the pandemic or if it was because of this negative perception. It's not very easy to understand it. The third effect of the pandemic was the effect on working conditions of blue collars and white workers. We saw employment problems, the problems in working hours. One of the most important issues is, now this is a very important concept. Murat Bey also mentioned about this, supply chain. Supply chain and logistics. We once again understood these are very important concepts this year. Our industry understood this very well. So we can talk about 4 negative developments. As long as we are healthy, we can overcome all of these problems thanks to your experience. At least during the last 15 years, as you have mentioned, the whole world is looking at China. After the coronavirus pandemic started in Wuhan, everyone was watching China. So do you think during the pandemic, what kind of other factors affected the business during the pandemic, in addition to what you have mentioned? Yes, I was planning to talk about this in addition to what I've just said. How did Turkey achieve to overcome this situation? Because past generations have been through these processes. Because as you know, in Turkey, after 1980s, high interest rates, elections, earthquakes, attempted coups, social unrest, we can call them as crises. These all led to some fluctuations in currency rates. And there are some international developments, such as the Lehman Brothers in the US, the crisis rising from China. There was some time when China was attacking on exports. It was also a time of crisis. Turkey in the past has been able to overcome these crises, and I believe that it will also overcome this one. In social life, in business life, what did we learn? What has changed? We saw that the demand did not fall simultaneously in all industries, and the working hours were challenging for the industrialists. Because of the restrictions, particularly white-collar workers had to work from home. And the most important factor here is that the computer infrastructure, the companies which had a strong infrastructure were easier to adapt to remote working system. During the pandemic, in addition to what I have just said, we saw a negative development in the labor markets. Yes, that's quite normal, actually. And stocking, standard implementations, due to standards, stocking has become more difficult. So, to ensure sustainable profitability, for sustainability, what is your strategy? The supply and demand balance affects the prices. Uğur Bey, Veysel Bey, and Barış Bey made very good presentations on the first date. I would like to thank them. We saw it very clearly in their presentations that currently in the world, there is a decrease in steel production by 100 million tons in the world. There is no decrease in Turkey, thankfully. Hopefully, we will be closing the year with the numbers at the same level as the previous years. Gokhan Bey, I'm sorry. There is a decrease in global production, but what is going on in China? There is no decrease in China. Yes, when we look at the last 9 months, there is no decrease in China. There is a very slight decrease in Turkey. There is some decrease in Vietnam, and there is some increase in Vietnam and Iran. In all other countries, in Europe, the decrease is about 20%. This decrease in production when there isn't any balance between supply and demand, this affects the prices. The prices go up. In the last 2 and 3 months, the end users cannot get their raw materials on the due dates. They think that they can never get the raw materials on time, and the prices were changed. And our strategy, it's becoming more and more difficult every day. We cannot say anything about this. Yes, it's difficult because there is too much fluctuation. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. Well, we hope for the best. In parallel to the developments in the middle and long term in steel industry in Turkey, how should the steel companies in Turkey develop themselves? Well, producing steel, flat steel is not enough. You should also create distribution channels. You should process flat steel. We have two concepts: steel service centers and distribution channels. These two channels make significant contributions to our sector. First of all, in local currency, these companies can sell their products in local currency. They offer logistics support, production planning support. They can keep stocks. These are the first things that come to my mind. These sectors make a significant contribution to the economy. In this context, the flat steel manufacturers in Turkey should work closely with steel service centers and distribution channels. They should have closer communication with these channels, particularly during the pandemic. The investments have been shelved, at least some of them have been shelved, but still, including my company and some of my members, there are some companies are doing the feasibility studies for some investments. And personally, I believe in the local dynamics and the local dynamics of Turkey, of our industry, or I want to be hopeful about these dynamics. Yes, finally, what are your expectations for 2021? Because every crisis comes with its own opportunities. In addition to the protectionist measures in the world and the impact of the pandemic, what can we do to sustain our activities? Will there be new opportunities for steel business? Are we in the beginning of a new and long era, or are we going just through a period? As I mentioned earlier, and the other speakers mentioned, except for 3 countries, we have seen a significant decrease in production in the world, particularly in Europe. And the prices have gone up significantly. In terms of supply and demand, we can make some comments about 2021. As the pandemic eases, there will be some increase in demand. But nevertheless, the current price levels, even before the pandemic, by the end of 2019, the raw material prices were well above the net prices, even before the pandemic. A minimum 25, 20, 30, 24, 25, 30, 40, 50% increase was there. In scrap, the prices increased by 25% as compared to pre-COVID period. In iron ore, the prices went up by 45%, and consequently, the prices in flat steel will increase by 40-50%. Of course, what happens next will depend on the demand. If there will be more demand, the prices will continue to go up. Yes, hopefully. Thank you very much, Gokhan. I would like to add a few remarks, if you allow me. What are we looking at for the next year? Because not only in terms of prices or supply and demand, we will also be watching the Far East. Because More than 50% of steel production and consumption takes place in China. We have two main issues here: protectionism, the potential changes in protectionist measures in the US may have negative or positive impact on Turkish steel industry. I think it will be more positive, mostly positive effects. And in Europe, the protectionist measures may be changed, and this may have a negative or positive impact in prices or supply and demand balance in Turkey. About protectionism, we should all agree that there is no economic justification for protectionism. These protectionist measures are not justified by economic principles. Because when we suggest something, there should be some economic calculations behind it. But there is no such calculation behind this protectionism. Because Turkey is dependent on foreign countries. Every year, 10 million tons of iron ore is important. Every year, 20 million tons of scrap is imported. So raw materials, in terms of raw materials, we are dependent on foreign countries. So Turkey cannot adopt a price policy that would shake the whole world. But of course, we should all agree that there are no economic justifications behind these protectionist measures. So do you think they are based on political grounds? No. I believe that we have a phrase that everyone should eat from their own plate. So every country is trying to be more protectionist to protect their own manufacturers. And their measures should be based on economic calculations. But for Turkey, there is no such justification. In Turkey, people, we are trying to establish these protectionist measures to protect the local manufacturers and to prevent any raw material coming from abroad. Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, now we move on to the next speaker of our session, the chairman of Galva Metal, an important company in production of coating materials. The floor is yours, Tolga Bey. Hello, everyone. We are once again at a very nice organization of Steel Orbits, and I see we have a huge turnout. Yesterday, there were 1,500 people, and we are really enjoying the presentations. Let me start with the first question, Tolga Bey. Galva has a success story. We are watching you closely. You are a startup in the steel industry. This is not something that we are familiar with. How did you achieve this? You are very kind, putting us as a success story. When you say startup, people think about technology companies. But startup means a venture. In steel and iron industry, we have fewer startups because this is a capital-intensive industry. Using just the intellectual capital would not be enough to achieve something. But we often talk about these technological terms. This is why I use the term startup. If you ask me how we achieve this, under the iceberg, there is a huge chunk of ice. In the beginning, we had nothing but working very hard. I tell everyone that I was working 100 hours a week. People don't believe me. I was waking up at 6 a.m. I went to the office. I went home at 7 a.m. I turned on my computer. I worked until midnight. So this was my first 10 years. I read a lot. So I like quoting during my speeches. I use other people's sentences to tell about my problems. And a book says that the time when you have to be more disciplined is the time when you have to be more successful. Our computer passcode has been discipline for a long time. I have changed it if you try to hack me, by the way. So when you achieve something, to maintain your achievement, you have to continue to work 100 hours a week for 10 years. So if you're not sustainable, you have to create a system, because when you're 90 years old, you cannot keep working 100 hours a week. This is not sustainable. I think it was in 2011, 2012, we started creating a team who were believing in our vision, and to grow, we looked at leadership theories, servant leader theories, corporate culture, organizational system leadership. I was reading a lot of big books. I think I have read every book in this area. So we created a company culture on this ground. We created a team on this ground. I think this is the factor in our success. I think we need to create that culture. I think I may be criticized by many people in the industry. All my workers are criticizing me at all times, but I like it. Sometimes I find the right thing by this way. Communication, focusing on mistakes, we like to call it, being able to criticize each other without hurting each other's feelings. So as long as you have a communication system that is based on the common reason of everyone, things go very well. I think this is the main principle that we have: open communication, free speech. Of course, this is like pushing the limits. Sometimes my colleagues complain that I am very difficult to be satisfied, but being good is bad, because there is a saying that good is the enemy of perfect. We don't have perfect companies because we have good companies. When you're good, you try to settle with that. And after some time, you go worse. But we need to create a culture who is always chasing the perfect. You said it very nice. Good is the enemy of perfect. But you can never be perfect. This may lead to some psychological problems. No, perfection is not a destination. Perfection is a journey that goes on and on. You have to change constantly. The whole team has to change constantly. Now, we are 150 people. I am only one person. In the first days, when we were on 5 people, I was able to change many things, but now I'm not like that. But that company culture plays an important role there, doesn't it? 150 people have the same company culture. That's important. Yes. Bringing people together under the same values, hiring the right people, giving them the right jobs, making everyone contribute. We achieved this because I have been reading 500, 700 books during those 7 years. And we are always pushing ourselves. During the first years of the company, we were doing transit trade from China. There were no protectionist measures in China or Africa. So we were selling 5 tons, 10 tons on vessels every day. But now things have changed. Back then, The Europeans were not buying from China. They didn't have confidence, and the Chinese didn't know how to import. They didn't know about accreditation, particularly the galvanized sheet lines did not know about accreditation. Then the business became more difficult with China. There were some protectionist measures. There was some pressure on Chinese government because of environmental issues. And in 2005, in 2008, 2010, they made significant investments. And then we said that it's becoming more difficult to make this transit trade. Let's move to a service center. But this is where we started pushing the limits because we didn't have the capitals, we didn't have land, we didn't have machinery, we didn't have the workers. But we were planning to start a facility. This is how we started. Thank you very much, Tolga Bey. Let me move on with the second question. You are working in trade, you have a German partner. From your and your partner's perspective, the steel service centers in Turkey, how are they doing according to international standards?
Of course, the steel service centers in Turkey, we cannot generalize it as such because we have wonderful steel service centers. We have slightly lower quality ones as well. But the good steel center service centers are no inferior to the European counterparts. Even there are certain fields in which we are much more advantageous, like troubleshooting. So their advantages with comparison to us is as follows. They are working in a huge economy where it is easy to have an access on the capital, and as a result, their efficiencies are quite high. After we have partnership with the Germans, we have visited their facilities, and I have spent one whole week to understand what they are doing. And they have a production line, for example, in Netherlands, and I watched what they are doing. And everything is automatic in their production line, and I try to understand what is going on. I mean, 30 tons of for example, they are producing 30 tons of steel roll, and there is no customer in Turkey who will be willing to buy that amount of steel rolls. And they say that 90% of our production is going on like this. I mean, they are buying those bands, with the diameters of 2,200 square meters. I mean, when we find such kind of a customer, even, customer with the demand of lower quality, then we say that we will be much more successful. I mean, both their customers with their equipment portfolio in their discretion and their equipments that they use for production is adding higher yields and efficiency. I mean, I was checking, for example, their sizes, for example, and they say that, we are selling 2,000 tons on a weekly basis with the sizes of 1.5 meters to 29. I mean, this is unimaginable. I mean, this economy of scale bring along many, for example, advantages. They can reach to better equipments. I mean, if you run those equipments in Turkey, most probably the yield will not be the same. For example, on one galvanized sheet production line, they, for example, produced 252,000 tons. I mean, such kind of sizes will definitely boost the efficiencies. I mean, their only advantages is that they can, for example, run with high very expensive products. I mean, for example, its rate is 7 million euros. If I for example have some additional investment, for example, we can establish a galvanized sheet production line, but the return of investment is 1 year. So in terms of the skills, skill set. They are no different from us. I mean, if we want, for example, we can also produce 2,000 tons on a weekly basis, but the demand is lacking in Turkey. Hopefully, as we grow even further, we will also reach to these economies of scale. Well, you are exporting to many countries. You are present in Bulgaria and Romania with your offices. What do you think is the position of Turkey on the international markets, and what kind of an impact the pandemic have on you? We have a subsidiary in Romania and we are present in Bulgaria for the last 3 years. Well, there are certain customers that you can sell your products to if you are present in the country. And of course, we can use our warehouses in those European countries due to the quota. We have this vision of becoming a local supplier in the European Union countries, and that's why we are working on those fields. Of course, it brings along many operational difficulties. I mean, the working environment is different. The accounting applications are different. For example, I mean, I am checking, for example, the balance sheets, for example, and different currencies are used, like dollars and Bulgarian levas and etc. But since we have been cooperating with those companies, we have already established the right way of doing business. The galvanized sheet, I mean, if you take a look to the statistics, with the increase in the Turkish local capacity, our export volume is increasing as well, which gives us a hope. And that's how we are trying to improve our own capacity as well. That's why we are expecting that our export volumes will increase in the upcoming term. What about the pandemic? Of course, pandemic changed our way of doing business. I mean, we have to wear masks, we are working home office, we have to take any kind of precautions whatsoever. But in terms of our commercial scale, the pandemic didn't have a huge impact on our business. I mean, in terms of the tonnages and the profit margin that we have through our sales is almost the same, but it definitely has an impact on our way of doing business. Once again, I'd like to thank my team because we didn't have many cases, which is well below the sectoral average. And this consciousness, I do believe, is our duty and debt to our nation. I mean, as our health system is about to be blocked, I mean, if we are not getting sick and leave the intensive care units empty for our other citizens, then I do believe that it will be for the good of our nation. Of course, it is really easy to get away from the coronavirus. If you are not get in touch with anyone, then you will be free of coronavirus, and we have succeeded that. Well, we have started speaking about the coronavirus, but unfortunately still we have problems in terms of wearing the masks. Why do you think that people are not issuing monetary penalties for the ones who are not wearing their masks? Of course, there is a rule, and if people are not obeying to those rules, then those people should be fined with penalty. I mean, generally the young people, when I ask them, I mean, why do you not wear your mask? Their answer is as follows: nothing bad will happen to me. But they have no idea that the fact that they are not wearing their masks will be harmful for the others. And unfortunately, the consciousness is lacking there. Well, it has something to do with the culture. I mean, we should think about the culture of our nation. In 2013, when we first started working, we have engineers from Germany, 3 engineers from Germany actually, and we have started gaining experience in the industry back then, but people were not, for example, wearing their protective helmets. And the name of the engineer was Franz, and I asked him, how did you prevent this man wearing a helmet? And he said to me that, I mean, they cannot take out their helmets. He couldn't understand the question, and he said to me that it's not possible, they are not taking out their helmets. And he said that I mean, what I'm trying to say that, I mean, when you are placing a rule, the Germans obey to that rule, but the Turkish people are always trying to bypass those laws. I mean, just like this protective helmets, the masks in today's pandemic world is a protective equipment, and the mask is even more important, because by wearing your mask, you are also protecting the others surrounding you. With the helmet, you are only protecting yourself. I mean, if this is embedded in our culture, then we should issue, I mean, monetary penalties and sanctions. I mean, we couldn't accomplish that as well. I mean, by not wearing your mask, you are harming others, and it's not I mean, easy. It's not, I'm sorry, hard to wear a mask, and it is sold only for 70 cents in Turkey, and they are not doing it. I mean, back in our time in the high school, we thought that, smoking is something very cool, and they most probably think that not wearing a mask is something cool. So I don't think maybe this is the reason. Well, thank you anyhow. What is your aim and targets for midterm and long term? And could you also please speak about the rebar investments? And could you please speak about, uh, let me correct myself. Are you going to change all your environmental impact assessments? So I always define it. We would like to actually grow with the value-added products. And I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, this project is making the other people really jealous about it. I mean, this is not a product that we created, but we have seen this product only in 3 countries abroad. Of course, it is being developed. This is only one example, but there are many different products. For example, we bought a pressing machine, for example. We have commissioned it as of November. So the reason why we bought this pressing machine is that we would like to, learn more about this pressing machine. And we are producing certain connection equipments for the construction sector. I mean, if we have gained enough knowledge, maybe we can also indulge in the White House hold equipments or the automated sector. So our business culture is, suitable for that. I mean, there are certain things that we do differently when we do the cutting. And we wait two new equipments which is not present in Turkey. Let me not articulate it, but let it live as a surprise. Most probably we will announce it on the second quarter of the next year. So our aim is to grow with value-added products, and in terms of the galvanized production, we have 130,000 tonnage of a production, and we of course would like to improve it as well. Could you also please speak about your forecast for the 2021? Well, a wonderful question, but I don't have the answer, unfortunately. Well, I am a optimist person. I always believe that things will be good. And the data also show that, for example, the World Bank is expecting a 4 or 5% of growth. And I do believe that there is a correlation factor by 2 or 3 times between the iron ores and the development, the economic growth on the global scale. We have actually played this game that Mr. Kerem mentioned, the whiplash effect, the whipping effect. I mean, one person, for example, demands 1 unit, and the other party is producing, for example, 1 unit is in balance. So then we are changing the supply and demand capacity. So It's a role-playing game, and during my master's degree, I actually played this game as well. But 10 years passed, and when Kerem mentioned, I remember that game. It is the right theory, and I'll check it once again. But I wish everything was stable in this world. I mean, 400 scrap, 800 galvanized production. I mean, if everything was stable and not changing, then we could have, competed with each other much more easily. So right now we are asking many questions, whether the furnaces will be commissioned in Europe, whether the China will import scraps or not. So this leads to many uncertainties and many fluctuations. As a result, sometimes the demands are increasing too much, and that's why we are not able to keep up with the demand. But our customers shouldn't actually get mad with us, because if we buy expensive, we have to sell expensive. I totally agree with Kerem. This fluctuations most probably will be seen in the upcoming year. Maybe it will not be the case for the first 3 or 4 months. And I also would like to say that there is a huge difference in terms of the scraps and also the hot rolled sheets. We have to follow that risk. We have to follow China. We have to follow the furnaces in Europe. Other than that, we will try to do our job as best as possible. If we can increase our value-added products, even if the prices will go lower, then you will have a chance to balance the whole situation. Thank you so much, Mr. Tolga. I benefited a lot from your presentation. I wish you a greater and further success. And in the last part of our session, we will try to answer the questions of our valuable participants. Let me take a look to the questions first, though. All right. Our first question. There are many questions, by the way. Ibrahim Uyanık asked the first question. Let me start with that. There is a high demand on the local market. As there is such a high demand on the local domestic market, why do you not give products to the local market, but you are aiming for exports? Mr. Kerem, let me answer that question if you like. Yeah, that question is addressed to the Borcelik company. Most probably this person couldn't listen to my whole presentation, but Borcelik is also established in 1994 in order to provide products with the high quality to the domestic players. On April, I also have given you the statistics and figures. As you know, the automobile production declined by 92%. So by April, due to force majeure, many of our customers didn't give any orders, and that was the term that we have actually gone for the exports. I mean, the problem lays in the fact that the end users couldn't plan right. They didn't give 10 units of order, but give, for example, 0. And on November, for example, they also ordered 20 units, for example, which is more than the steel sector capacity. That's why we couldn't keep up with the demand. That's why on November, we stopped giving exports. I mean, I have spoken with, many steel companies, and I have to say that the steel companies are right now focusing to meet the demand on the domestic markets at the moment. But once again, it was all about the unplanned orders. So as the local players try to compensate the lack of order that they had in the month of April, that was the reason why we went for the export markets. The second question comes from Yashar Can Demir. Anyone can ask that. I mean, since you cannot travel during the pandemic, how were you able to increase your exports? Well, I have mentioned in my speech actually. I mean, we were prepared. That's how we did this. I mean, we didn't try to increase our export volume as of April. I mean, you should be prepared. You have to establish your agencies 10 years before, and you have to actually promote. Uh, and otherwise, Vietnamese galvanized sheet will be your product name. You have to promote yourself. I mean, we have invested in agencies, and that's how we were able to give fast reactions. And we increase our exports without any additional efforts. So that's possible. Let me continue then. Mesut, Mr. Mesut asked a question. You have given examples from 2008. So if it is possible, could you please compare the 2008 market conditions and today's market condition? What kind of similarities do you see? I'm not sure whom he is addressing. Mr. Gokhan, maybe you have spoken about this. In 2008, most probably many of our colleagues experienced it, but in 2008, the prices went up and the import levels were so high, and we have high level of inventories at our discretion. Right now, we don't have any stock in our hands. So we work with the minimum stock right now. So as of today, I don't believe that the market is having the same conditions of the 2008 conditions. In the past, the people were concerned to have higher level of stocks and materials in their hands, but right now I do believe that the stock levels are not comparable to the 2008 levels. Well, I totally agree with Mr. Gökhan. It is a wonderful analysis, but let me add one more thing. In 2008, we had a problem. Tolga also mentioned. In terms of the raw materials and product prices, there are no similarities at all. In 2008, this actually a connection has already been lost. And most probably this created the fundamental concern. In 2008, working with 100% of a capacity was the trend back then, but in 12 years, the producers learned how to limit their capacity. These are the actually three main factors which are different in 2008 and today. All right. If there are no additional comments, let me continue then. Mr. Onur asked a question. Mr. Kerem, are you expecting foreign investment in the short term in Turkey? No, unfortunately, at the moment, we are not expecting such a serious foreign investments, but we expect with hope. Well, there are many situations where we were so close to foreign investment, but it didn't happen. Türker Bayraktar asked a question. Mr. Kerem, first of all, I wish you greater success. What kind of strategy did you follow in relation to the European quotas? Well, we try to make use of this quota and fill the quota in the European Union. At the beginning of my speech, I have already mentioned that we are actually taking the rabbit out of the hat all the time. I mean, we actually acted first in order to get a greater share in the European market, but unfortunately we have a problem only in terms of the painted sheets because the quotas are so low and we had troubles. Andreas, we're gonna ask a question. Can you please ask Tolga how much the social media important is in his business? He's a good fan of Fenerbahce, isn't he? He asked. What would you like to say, Mr. Tolga? Andrea is a close friend and we are, doing business with him. Well, we are such a young company and our age average is 33.1. I mean, the executive board age average. So we don't have the luxury not to use social media. And it is also one of the cheap advertisement models. I mean, we can show ourselves, we can do our PR very, easily. I mean, both in terms of our product launches and advertisements, we are using social media with great joy. And we have many colleagues at the beginning of their 20s, by the way. And since they embrace the social media, we are making use of the social media channels quite active and fast. So in terms of the Fenerbahce, I don't want to make any comments. Thank you. Another anonymous user asked a question. We see mergers in the steel sector. Boru Steel and Wuhan, for example, merged. And they also acquired other companies and they became the #1 company in the world. SSAB and ThyssenKrupp merger are being discussed. Do you think that we can see mergers in the Turkish sector? If this is the case, in which subsectors we will see a merger? Pipe, galvanized production? Well, unfortunately, the mergers do not take place in Turkey to the extent that we observe it in the European countries. I do believe this has something to do with the culture. I always want a merger to take place, but we, of course, wish more mergers to take place in Turkey. It is even easier to discuss those issues in Europe when you say, for example, let's have a merger. When you have that discussion with actually another, for example, company, all of a sudden they think that what kind of a hidden agenda that the counterpart has in their minds. This is the first, question comes to the counterparts. Unfortunately, we don't see many mergers in Turkey, so in the short term, we are not expecting those mergers to take place. Another question by an anonymous user. What would you like to say about the possibility of Borcelik Group for investing in a facility to produce hot rolled sheet? And also, I would like to say there are certain news that the Borcelik Group will buy a facility. Well, wonderful question. Well, just before 2008, there was explanations. Well, I'm not sure whether it was something good or not. Well, for the greenfield projects, we don't expect such kind of investment to be made for a greenfield project. Well, Turkish shareholders are much more sensitive, but we always take into consideration for cooperation and merging opportunities. This is not something that we do all the time, and we have done this 10 years before. It is also not in our current agenda, and we, of course, would like to take this issue into consideration intellectually. Let's continue with the last question. So, in COVID-19, actually, a pandemic, in terms of the shocks in the supply chain, which are the ones who recovered against those external shocks? And what are the most important lessons that are taken out of during that process? I believe this question has to do with the supply side. What are the most important lessons that is being taken out? Well, we have seen the ones who recovered fast, and we have seen certain parties who have slightly affected. It has something to do with your risk appetite. We have many customers, for example, I mean, in the automotive sector, in the white household sector, for example, we do our agreements on a yearly basis. Those customers didn't feel any effect, and they continue their pathway without any negative impact. And I also would like to say that the tonnage that they will receive has warranted, and the prices has been warranted. I mean, there are many customers who have not been affected at all, but there are certain customers who would like to buy on spot. And our other panelists also mentioned to that. I mean, we always try to make out of the opportunities. We are not trying to make money out of the efficiency and yield, but we would like to make money out of the efficiency, out of the opportunities. But what happens then, whenever there is a crisis, people want to, buy anything, but all of a sudden they realize that the prices are actually leapfrogging, and rather than buying 1 unit or 2 units, all of a sudden they order 10 units. Of course, this brings along a lot of advantages, but this was a thing in the past. But the companies who can actually work more proactively become much more successful. So I do believe that the companies who reacted fast actually went through those times with least damages inflicted on them. But the companies who have waited a lot and acted on the last minute didn't recover quite successfully. Of course, the supply chains differ from each other. I mean, the companies who thought that, for example, I can, buy the materials for my furnace on December. Why should I, for example, rush right now? They had troubles and problems. I can say that. Is there anyone else who would like to make an additional comment? Otherwise, I will adjourn the session. Well, let me make one additional comment. Well, this topic is a huge opportunity for Turkey. I mean, if you take into consideration the European response and the global response, we have to take ourselves a lesson out of this problem. We have to manage our supply pool, supply chain, right. It doesn't have to do only with the steel sector. Even a toasting machine, for example, the ones who supplied a lot from China had huge difficulties in the first 2 quarters. Of course, due to the cost, the supply from China will continue in Europe. But if Turkey acts right, then the certain part of the supply from China will shift to Turkey. So right now, I mean, as the China grows as well as everybody is, in recession, the prices of the containers are increasing, for example, from 1,000 to 3,000. I mean, when the intensity is on one part of the globe, then they'll have logistic problems as well. I mean, as a result, since the labor force is much more cheaper in Turkey, Turkey might actually materialize on this opportunities without going into the trap of cheap labor force. I mean, I'm not speaking only on behalf of the steel sector, iron and steel sector. We should be making out of these opportunities in all sectors so that Turkey can go to a better class in terms of the economic development. Thank you so much, Mr. Tolga. We have come to the end of our session. Once again, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for sharing their valuable information with us. And I also would like to thank our participants for their contributions. Right now, we will have a networking break. And then by 2 o'clock Turkish time, within the moderation of Murat Eryilmaz, we will have a wonderful panel. Do not miss it.